Good morning, all. Welcome to the Common Good podcast. Glad to have you aboard today. It is a Tuesday, March 15th. It means a couple of things. Tuesdays, we get to talk politics. Rob Myers here, Rev Wendy running for Congress is here, so we'll be talking to her about her run. But it's also March 15th, and Rob, we all know what that means.
Today, I think it's today, Steve Garrett's birthday. Hey, Steve, happy birthday to you. So glad that you're a listener. Hopefully you're still a listener.
Somehow Rob picked up that one of our listeners named Steve Garrett has a birthday today. Can't quite remember how, but it got noted down. So happy birthday to you, old friend Steve. All the best to you on a day like today. Hey, we always chit chat about the weather. I'm in Minneapolis. It's one of those days that makes your spirit jump. Going to be 50 degrees, sunny, light wind. The snow is melting. It's as if we live in Denver on a day like today. So, and we like to chit chat about the weather for a second because it's one of the things that we all hold in common as we walk outside under the same sun. So at least we can start there with a little common good. Rob, how are things snuggled just outside of Fayetteville, Arkansas?
Yeah, it's kind of overcast today. Rain last night, but I think we had snow last week on Friday, and I think it's our last snow of the year, hopefully. And now, spring is about to be upon us.
Well, you live in one of those fine places in Arkansas where spring gets to come in March. I live in one of the places where March is a serious winter month. It has been in the past our snowy month.
You said it's 50? Is because I'm
today? I'm 2 days ago. It was -7. So -7.
What's it going to be tomorrow morning, Doug?
It's going to be 25 tomorrow morning. There were 0 degrees, and then they took away 7 more of the 0. It's like being in debt. It's like a bank account that has gone below balance. That's how cold it is here. Well, Rev Wendy, you're in Washington D.C. How are things looking in the nation's capital there?
Listen, we have like a winter, then a spring, then winter wanted to come back, and then fall. It's a mixed bag as far as our weather. Now today it's nice. The sun's out. It's going to be in the 60s by the time it's all said and done. But on this past Saturday, we had a snowstorm that suddenly just appeared out of nowhere. It was like a freak tundra of some sort. So you never know, what we're going to get in DC, which is kind of the theme of this city. But, hey, the weather falls in line with that.
Well, Reverend Wendy, we're glad to talk to you for so many reasons. As your congressional website says, Reverend Wendy for Congress. .com. You are a reverend and you're running for Congress. And nothing could fit our little theme around here of calling faith voters to the common good through politics and civic engagement like a reverend running for office. All right. So and I should note, you also are a school support staff, which is just such crucial and important work. Why, with all the important things you have going on in your life, reverending and school support staff and all the work, do you decide you want to add to that to run for Congress? And we should note, run for Congress in Washington, D.C., where whomever the representative is in Congress actually is treated sort of like a second version of a congressperson, because you don't actually get to vote on any of the votes because of how we handle a district as opposed to a state in a typical congressional district. What brings you to wanting to run for Congress?
Yeah, God, why did I do that? Yes. So
it's a good thing to check in on every now and again, isn't it?
I ask myself that often. Quite honestly, friends, I feel like public service is a form of ministry. So let me start there. And with that frame of mind, I feel like wherever I can lend my gifts, my energy, and my commitment to serving people, I look for opportunities to do that. I've always been interested in politics. I've always kind of helped out and volunteered and made phone calls and things like that, because I believe that faith and politics are not mutually exclusive. You understand what I'm saying? I believe that we are called as people of faith to hold leadership accountable for the policies that are put in place. As a social justice advocate, I'm concerned about legislation that impacts the poor and the oppressed and the widowed, and making sure we are taking care of the least of these. So the wires crossed for me in terms of considering even pursuing this run, right? But from a practical perspective, 2 years ago, I was personally afraid for our country. I was afraid for our democracy. The Trump administration was in the midst of running for re-election. I'm talking June 2020, and I'm sitting at home and I'm watching civil rights leaders like John Lewis pass away and C.T. Vivian, and I'm watching all of the work that they've done be threatened, civil rights, voting rights being rolled back. And I felt like I want to do something. I said, God, I need to do something. What can I do? How can I get involved? The church that I was pastoring at the time, Open Door Metropolitan Community Church, it had closed, unfortunately. It was an older church, and we know a lot of churches are experiencing, some trouble. So there was, attendance was down, donations were down. So we made the hard decision to have to close that ministry. So I found myself then saying, okay, God, what's my next step? And where am I feeling led and called to? And ultimately decided I wanted to take my skill set and offer it in the public domain as a candidate for Congress in DC. And the last thing I'll say is the reason why I chose this particular role, because I thought about it. Do I really want to put my all? Do I really want to set aside my life for a season for a role that doesn't even vote? But you know what? I said, I absolutely do, because until I can use my vote, I can use my voice. I can write legislation. I can influence what's being said. I can make sure the voice of DC residents, 700,000 of us who pay taxes and don't have representation, are at that table, and that our needs are being met. And so I feel like it was a worthy fight to undertake. I felt like that my life has kind of built me for it. So here I am.
Well, so great.
Wendy, you're actually challenging in the Democratic primary a long-standing congresswoman, Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton, and she has served in this role for a very long time. Why is it that you felt the need to say, hey, I think the people of DC need different representation than what they've had for so long?
Well, one thing I'll say, and I like to say on the campaign trail, is I have all due respect for Delegate Norton. She has served the city for 32 years, and I don't have anything bad to say. I don't think you have to say anything negative about someone else to lift up your positive. So you won't hear me say anything negative. I say I'm not running against Eleanor. I'm running for DC. I'm running for this city to give us options, because I believe democracy calls for that. But I also was getting the sense in talking with some of the parents at my school, talking with residents just every day, that they were feeling like it was time for a change, that it was time for us to begin considering our new chapter and what that might look like. And so as I sought advice before I actually made the decision to run, hearing those kinds of encouraging messages made me feel like this was the right step to take, that it's not a replacement of Delegate Norton, but also, and I'll just say this, in the 32 years that she's been in office, she's had 3 primary challengers. I think that all incumbents should be challenged just to keep them on their toes, right? Because you can become complacent, you can get a little comfortable. And I was noticing that some people just felt like, she shouldn't be challenged, or maybe we'll just wait until she makes that decision. And I respect that, but I also, again, understand that democracy is healthier when there are multiple people in the mix. And so with that in mind, I decided to go ahead and go for it.
Yeah. And I completely agree with you on that. I think, so often we fall into this trap where we think that, it's her seat or it's his seat just because they've been in it for so long, when in fact, all of these positions belong to we the people. And, you know, if we, the people, want to make a change, that's certainly our prerogative. And just so DC is the type of place, and, you know, there are places like this all over the country on both sides where the real race is in the primary. Whoever wins the Democratic primary in DC is going to hold this position.
Correct. That's very true. And just to go back to something that you said, that's another thing that I say on the trail when people will say to me, "Oh, are you running for Eleanor's seat?" And I'll say, with all due respect, it's the people's seat.
Yeah.
That's the people's seat. I have to remind people my run has been just as much about voter inspiration as it has been about education. Some people literally forgot that that's a House seat that's up every 2 years because she's been in it so long. So they're saying, you know, they'll ask me, well, is she retiring? And I'll say, well, you know, if you retire her, I mean, you know what I'm saying? It's not, that's an elected seat. It's not an appointed seat.
Yeah.
So, you know, I have to help people out.
Wendy, talk to us about DC statehood and, you know, if DC should be a state, like why, like how that would impact, you know, I'm in Arkansas, Doug's in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Like how do you have any sense of like it, you know, how that impacts, you know, the rest of the country, you know, whether or not DC should be a state and how all that works? What's your take on that?
Well, I mean, of course, it will benefit, you know, the rest of the country because we'll be fully participatory. We'll be able to bring some of our voices and our expertise to the, you know, to the state level conversations. But before, with all due respect, before it benefiting the rest of the people, what about us? Yeah. We are 700,000 tax-paying residents. We pay more taxes than 33 states right now. We have more population than Wyoming and Vermont, who both have representation, and yet we don't. We have to wait and be beholden to the federal government to make decisions on what we feel is best for our city. So we can put our budget together. We can decide we want to do something, and then the federal government can say, no, you know what, DC doesn't need that. You know, let's go back to January 6th for a moment. If you all recall that particular day, we didn't even have the authority to summon the National Guard to come protect our citizens. We have to go through, you know, DOD and calls weren't getting through, and people didn't know who to get to sign off on getting the National Guard to protect us here in DC. A couple of weeks ago, you have a New Mexico representative who was introducing some legislation to ban critical race theory in DC public schools. Well, first and foremost, sir, critical race theory is not being taught in DC public schools. But secondly, I'm gonna need you to focus on public schools in New Mexico. You've not even set foot in a DC public school. How dare you sit over there on Capitol Hill and make decisions about a school system just because it's something to do that you've never even experienced? And so it's things like that that suggest to me that DC statehood is important for us, for first and foremost, but what benefits us would thereby benefit the nation.
Yeah, boy, Wendy. I mean, I have so many thoughts about statehood. There's this one part of my brain that says, of course, there should be statehood representation, which would mean 2 senators. It would mean a selection of Congress people, maybe not just one non-voting delegate, but maybe 2, and maybe 2. The normalization. The other side of it, which is somebody who doesn't live in DC, I really like the idea that Washington, D.C. is this head of the location of our federal government and kind of belongs to everybody. You know, that thing where you feel like it's not Iowa versus Minnesota. It's not Arkansas compared to Louisiana, you know, the kind of possessiveness that comes in states, people's relationship. Right. It's that, I don't know, we kind of all own it. And I used to really struggle with those 2 competing ideas. And then some people said, well, look, you still make that. You make a portion. Maybe it's the center of it and it's sort of a donut. And there's a way where it's still this. Yeah. Would you talk a bit about that? Because I think a lot of people are real protective.
it would carve out the federal district. So the federal district would still remain. All of the seat of government would be its own federal district. We're talking about the surrounding 8 wards of culturally diverse, vibrant residents who often get confused with what happens in the federal district. And that's why we're fighting. We're fighting for our identity, because there's a Washington and then there's a DC. You understand what I'm saying? And oftentimes we get lumped in with what's happening over on Pennsylvania Avenue with Washington's a swamp, or Washington's this, or they can't get things together. We're like, excuse me, we can. We're just trying to go to work. We're just trying to do what we need to do. Yeah. And the issue, there's really not a reason not to make us a state. They've made it a political issue, essentially. Mm-hmm. Republicans have mostly said, if we give DC statehood, that's going to be 2 probably guaranteed blue Senate seats that are going to flip the power of the Senate, and we can't afford that. So therefore, we're going to keep denying these people, right? That's not okay. It doesn't matter that DC happens to vote blue. It's not about that. It transcends ideology. It's a human right. It's also a racial justice issue, because Washington, D.C. has the largest plurality of Black and brown voters in the country too. So there's some of that that's coming into play that, is causing the statehood delay. Because trust me, I believe personally, if they thought for a second that either one of those Senate seats were going to be Republican, we'd have probably been a state, last cycle.
Yeah, I hear you. Hey, Wendy, what about this argument that people make that says, look, take the population of DC and sort of cut it in half or whatever, put some of it in Maryland, put some of it in Virginia, make those the citizens just part of the, the citizenry of the adjoining states, and be done with it. What about that? How does someone like you think about that, and how will you advocate for that when you're the representative from Washington, D.C.?
I'm just going to advocate based on what the people want. And Maryland doesn't want us back. Virginia doesn't want us back, and we don't want to go back to them either. I mean, that may sound trivial to some, but it would, you're talking about, adding 300,000 more folks to Maryland or to Virginia, and they already have their own legislatures in place. They already have the capital cities, and the needs of DC residents are unique. And we have determined that we can govern ourselves, and it would take too much effort to do something. The retrocession is not something either jurisdiction is interested in. And so for me, you would have to, our residents would need to know why we feel like that is more feasible than simply just granting us statehood, which is something that has happened over the course of our history for the past 200 years.
Yeah, that's a really important point a lot of us don't think about, because if you're a certain age like I am, all the states were sort of settled by the time I was born. But then there's these lingering issues that hang out there, like DC or Puerto Rico, or all the people who live in the other places that don't have full representation. And then some of our states are just too big, and other ones are just too small. Like the idea that you have 2 senators from every state, which includes California and New York and Florida and Texas, massive populations with 2 representatives. And like you say, Vermont and Idaho and Wyoming and other places where the proportional representation is so small. So some people are like, hey, we should get this thing up to 55 or 60 states, divide Texas, divide California, divide Florida, make them 2 separate, let's do an entire state project in this country to really reimagine our politics. And the people I've heard talk about this, they're like, it's probably going to balance out for the places that will lean toward one side, lean toward another, or be sort of up for grabs. So it's going to keep the balance sort of where it is, but just would give us better representation. And it feels like that's also true not only at the Senate level, but also there used to be a number tagged to how many representatives based on population. And then we've decided, no, we're going to lock that in at a certain number. So it feels like, all this long question, do you feel, as I do, that the citizenry of our country is just underrepresented by the number of representatives that we have available to us, and somehow that creates this idea that people are disconnected from their politics?
Absolutely. They are underrepresented and inadequately represented. And so I think that we need to reimagine and redesign everything. So much has changed since these original designs, and to think somehow that we, wouldn't evolve to meet these moments is unfortunate, and why we see people becoming so disillusioned and disconnected from the government.
Yeah. Now, Wendy, during the 2020 election, you were really energized by the campaign of Andrew Yang. You're part of the Yang gang, and hopefully that's okay for me to say. I don't, so I know that part of the reason why is that you're a big believer in universal basic income. Could you tell us about why that's such an important idea, and an idea that time has really come for us as a country?
Well, let me say, yes, I am definitely Yang Gang. I was on board early. I actually had the pleasure of serving as the director of spiritual and cultural outreach for the Andrew Yang presidential campaign. So that was an incredible experience, and also served to help me make this decision to run for Congress not long after he suspended his presidential campaign. So definitely am grateful to his influence. But it was his stance on universal basic income that drew me to become interested in his campaign in the first place. I read an article that was introducing his presidential run back in 2018. It was called "The Robots Are Coming," and it was talking about the threat of automation and how many jobs were, set to be automated away or had been automated away, and particularly across the Midwest, and how that was some of what got Trump elected. Those folks felt left out of the conversation, that nobody was paying attention to what they needed, and that we needed to be thinking about removing the middleman and bureaucracy and getting money into people's hands, direct cash payments to help them recover, to get them a lifeline. And all I could think about, I'm from Ohio originally. I don't know if you all both knew that. Go Bucks.
Where in Ohio?
Portsmouth, Ohio, southern Ohio, just south of Columbus. I was born there, raised.
Nice. I was born and raised in Cleveland. So.
Okay, so you were at the top of the state. I was at the exact opposite bottom, but all my family is there, and my dad was born in Dayton. Everybody's there, and I came here to go to Howard University when I was 17 years old and fell in love with DC and stayed. So I consider DC my adult home. But having been in the Midwest and growing up there, there were a lot of factories. My grandfather worked at the atomic plant. My grandmother worked at the shoe factory. And when those folks shipped jobs overseas or closed, those jobs got automated away, my grandparents had nothing to fall back on. And my city kind of collapsed in on itself. They brought in other jobs, but the pay wasn't comparable. You can't work on an assembly line job and make decent $25 an hour, which was a lot in the late 70s, or early 80s, and then expect someone to go work at Walmart. It didn't work out. And so I thought about, if my grandparents had a universal basic income, if they had a UBI that they knew that they could rely on until they could figure out what their next steps would be, I think that would have helped them feel a little bit better about their situation and other families. And when I read the principle of universal basic income and how it's $1,000 a month, unconditional, not something that you have to qualify for, that you have to be means tested and jump through a bunch of hoops to prove to people that you're worthy of receiving, I said, now this has got spiritual connotations to it. Let me read a little more deeply. And then I discovered that Martin Luther King had championed it. And matter of fact, in his book, Chaos or Community, the night before he was assassinated, he was speaking about the basic income and getting money into people's hands, a guaranteed minimum income that we needed to now start empowering people financially to have so that they could do better. So if Martin Luther King was championing it, I was like, oh, sign me up, because that sounds like looking out for the least of these and caring for the poor. And so that's why universal basic income is so incredibly important to me, not just because it has practical implications, it has spiritual ones according to who we say we are as a nation. It's not a handout, it's a help out. And we used to do that in this country.
Yeah, boy, I'm a big UBI fan myself. And The historical reference to that is really important, that in the late 60s and early 70s, King was supportive of it, and so was Richard Nixon. People didn't know. And the argument and the alternative against, then, I don't think they call it UBI, I think they called it base minimum income, but against UBI or base minimum income, was the alternative to that was the minimum wage, putting the demand onto businesses to pay a minimum wage. And these two ideas were in competition. Ultimately, the minimum wage won out. And now, so in the last 50 years, just the way we manage how we care for people in our society, because we have a very sophisticated and complex and hole-filled system for doing this, from food stamps to unemployment insurance to tax deductions to breaks, child tax credits, all this stuff would be so much cheaper. I've gone on and on about this in this podcast. We would save so much money by removing the system that has to manage all of that, that there would be enough money just in the management of the system. Now, those people that manage all that system would have to be cared for too, because it's a lot of employees that actually care for all that system. But when people think, could we afford it? It's not an issue of, is there enough money? The amount of money spent now on payments that go out and the administration of it is sufficient, in my reading anyway. It is sufficient for this. So it's something else. And it's based on this merit-based system where we think people should only get from the government if somehow they've earned it. But then we don't really mean that. We don't mean that about Social Security. We don't mean that about Veterans Affairs. We don't mean that about farmers being underwritten for crop. Like, we don't actually mean that. We really mean poor people shouldn't get money because they don't work hard enough. That's basically what it is. And so it's really a poverty conversation that interlaces with race and everything else. But there's enough poor white people in this country that should really be advocating for this, along with all the people of other racial communities that should be advocating for this. And I really had hoped that what the lasting consequence of Andrew Yang's run would be this conversation. So you're going to have to pick up this mantle, is what I'm saying. So when you're the representative from D.C., Reverend Wendy, we're going to really need you walking around with a federal checkbook in your hand, saying, "Let's write those checks to everybody." It would just be.
I'm already ready to go. Pandemic. I'm sorry, I'm already ready to go head up a UBI caucus. We got progressive caucuses, caucuses, and all that other kind of stuff. Where's the UBI caucus at? Where's the folks that are talking about what you just said? Because this is about eradicating poverty. This isn't about anything else. But if we can eradicate poverty, a whole lot of the other issues that we're experiencing in this nation will be solved overnight.
It's one of the things. Look, that you can't solve everything with money. What you can solve with money are the problems created by not having enough money. So no, you can't solve every problem. It doesn't buy you love, but it does buy you a house and a car and things to eat. Like it's this craziness of the system we have just makes no sense. And there's this option that's out there, which we saw both with the earned child income tax credit, moving it up from being dispersed, at tax time to overall throughout the year. And then the basic minimum income payments that went out to nearly everybody during the pandemic. Like, if you wondered how we would ever do this, where would the money come from? How would it work? We've already done it, and we should just keep going.
If we can bail out banks, we can bail out our people.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, Wendy, let me ask you this. You're a first-time candidate. What have you learned on the campaign trail? Take folks inside for like a non-career politician. Like, what's it like running for office? Like, has anything surprised you? Have you learned something? Have you I had no idea it was going to be this way? Like, give us a little window into what it's like to actually run for office as a regular person.
It is intimidating. It is exciting. It is exhausting, but it is also exhilarating all at the same time. The one thing that I would recommend to anyone who is considering running for office, first and foremost, let me say, do it. If it's on your heart to do it. Part of the reason I'm running, I tell people, is because I can, but so can you. Get offline, get off Twitter and go down to your board of elections and fill out some paperwork. If you know, because there is a place for online advocacy, but we are, so quick to complain about what's not being done, not recognizing that we have the opportunity to go change it ourselves and step up if we don't feel like others are stepping up in a way that we want them to. So I commend anyone who takes this on, because it's not for the faint of heart. I'll say that. One of the things that I have learned, though, is that you need to constantly refer to your why. And that is what will keep you going. Not donations, not folks supporting you, because even in those moments, there will be times where you question, is this the right thing? Am I making the right choice here? And you have to remind yourself, why did I choose to do this in the first place? What was it I was hoping to do? What was it I was hoping to achieve? And so long as you can keep that front and center, it helps you get through those tougher times when you think that maybe you have gotten in over your head. I'm not a politician. I'm a minister. I'm a mama. I'm a new grandmama. The love of my life. The love of my life was born on May 2020 in the middle of a pandemic, May 11th, 2020. My baby grandson, Miles, he keeps me going. When I look in his eyes and his face, I think about the world I want to leave for him. And so I think that, for anybody who's thinking about it, first and foremost, determine what your why is. Look around you at what race to run, because again, there were other offices. Some people said to me, Reverend Wendy, why not mayor or city council? Why'd you go straight for, Congress? And I said, because I feel like you need to match yourself with tasks that match your strengths, not necessarily exploit your weaknesses. The mayoral and city council roles, those are more administrative, executive level. That's not my strength per se. I'm not the one to keep the police chief and the fire chief from strangling each other in a meeting. But if you want me to use my voice, I'm an advocate. I speak up on the behalf of the masses. I can talk and use my voice to speak out for the voiceless and for those who feel like they've, been forgotten in society. That was a better fit for Congress. And so also determine where you will best be suited. So a day in the life of a candidate really is about focusing in on your why, surrounding yourself with a good team, but also understanding and keeping in mind that the run should not be about you, but about the constituents and the representatives that you desire to serve.
Yeah, well said.
Wendy, this is just fantastic. Just tell us real quickly here at the end of our time for chatting, what's the calendar for you? When is the primary? Are there other dates that are more important before that for people that want to get connected? What do they need to know for scheduling?
Well, as you all said, with DC being primarily Democratic, the likelihood is that the winner of the primary will go on to be the nominee for the general. So the primary is important. It's June 21st. We're just under 100 days until the primary, June 21st. 2022. Prior to that, though, we're right in the midst, in the thick of now, trying to collect signatures to get my name on the ballot, because that's another thing you have to think about, the very practical things of running for office in DC. To be on the ballot, and that's everybody, incumbent, anybody running for a citywide, statewide office, has to get 2,000 signatures from DC registered voters in order to get your name on the ballot. So I've been out here hustling at farmers markets and grocery stores. I turn around while I'm in the checkout line at CVS and I'm like, excuse me, are you because 2,000 people are a lot. It's a lot of people. So.
Yeah,
it's a lot of people. And look, it's one of the great things about retail politics. You got to get out there and look someone in the eye and say, I want to serve this community in this way, and I need your help to do it. I'm just so glad that our system demands that. I wish more people had to engage in it, and we just couldn't be more proud of what you're doing, and would love to help any way we can. So Wendy for Congress, Reverend Wendy for Congress.
Rev Wendy for Congress, Rev Wendy for Congress.com. Yes.
Yep.
And we are at People Power Campaign. Please check us out. Please help. Even if you're not in DC, if you can spread the word, like I mentioned earlier, I'm running against a 32-year incumbent with citywide name recognition. So one of our biggest obstacles was getting our name out there. But once people find out I'm running, once people say like, oh, somebody is running, I'm hearing that, oh, thank God, I'll have an option this time. So helping us spread the word is paramount, especially in these final months.
Yep. And I would just say this, for those of you that are TikTok users, you got to follow Reverend Wendy on TikTok. There are two must follows in politics on TikTok. Reverend Wendy is one. A lady running for lieutenant governor of Arkansas named Kelly Kraut, who's going to be on the podcast in a few weeks, is another. Using TikTok like it's meant to be used as a politician. Wendy, I just absolutely love it. You got to follow Reverend Wendy on TikTok.
Wendy, thanks for being with us. We're going to show people your video here as our transition. But thank you so much for running. Thanks for being a part of this, and we look forward to staying in touch with you about all this.
Thank you so much for your time today and your support and for the great work you are doing. I appreciate you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. So here.
I wake up every morning ready to minister to the needs of DC families to help them along their life's journey. My DC journey began in 1986 on the campus of Howard University, where I came to experience what hope is all about. I'm a minister, a mother, a grandmother, a public servant, fighting for a better world that I believe is still possible for my family and for yours. DC is my adult home, the place that raised me, shaped me, embraced me, inspired me, and gave me the audacity to hope for brighter days ahead for all 8 wards of our city. I'm running for DC delegate in Congress to represent the voices and aspirations of the 700,000 culturally diverse residents who deserve DC statehood, UBI, and so much more. With every conversation, every encounter, every connection, I become more and more committed to bringing tangible changes to the lives of all our people and dealing more hope across our city. I'll bring that same energy to Capitol Hill if given the opportunity. My life built me for this. I can do this. All I need to be given is the chance. I'm Wendy Hamilton. I'm running for Congress, and I approve this message.
Yeah, it's a great video. Hey, what was that flag there with the 3 red stars and the 3 red stripes? Do you know? Is that a DC flag?
I would assume that's the DC flag.
Never seen that in my life.
Yeah.
Well, Wendy's fantastic.
Isn't she something?
Forward to that connection for a long while.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, Rob, more happening in in politics.
So Doug, we have a little game that we play every once in a while here on the show. It's a little game of Has Doug Seen This? And where we play a little video that you hopefully have not seen, and we watch your reaction live.
Okay. All right.
So we've got a video that we want to watch. Now, this is the former president of the United States, that former guy, appearing on a podcast.
The failed re-election candidate, the twice impeached one. Okay.
Yeah.
Because there's just a lot of former presidents. I just like to segregate them out by those who lost their re-election and those who were impeached from those who were not. Yeah. So anyway, that one.
So on a podcast that is a UFC themed podcast, because certainly the former president of the United States should spend his time there. And he is he's asked
everybody's little podcast. I mean, let's champion all the small who would be on that podcast.
Yeah. So and then he's asked a question about the Ukraine and the war going on there, and he has a response that I really want you to see.
All right.
It would have never happened, and we did talk about it. I mean, he definitely wanted Ukraine, loved Ukraine. Would never have happened.
What do you see happening next then? Because it seems like the tensions are high. How does this all end? Is this going to be like a long-term thing? How do you see it unfolding?
Well, I said this a long time ago. If this happens, we are playing right into their hands. Green energy, the windmills, they don't work. They're too expensive. They kill all the birds. They ruin your landscapes. And yet the environmentalists love the windmills. And I've been preaching this for years. The windmills, and I had them way down, but the windmills are the most expensive energy you can have. And they don't work. And by the way, they last a period of 10 years. And by the time they start rusting and rotting all over the place, nobody ever takes them down. They just go onto the next piece of prairie or land and destroy that. It's incredible that they want, but other forms of green energy, they don't have.
I mean, that is unbelievable. What do you think's going to happen in Ukraine? And then he just goes into green energy.
The windmills.
So it's just separating out the fact that somehow he either misheard the question or, as a lot of us believe, he has some mental deterioration going on and lost track of the question. But then his belief about windmills is just ludicrous. It's not true. That's Look, windmills might not be the best form, but they don't kill the birds, and they don't just rust and fall into prairies and then, oh my lands. It is great. It is just something, we just continue to say in the work that we do that the candidate matters.
Mm-hmm.
And so, political parties are a big deal, but people will make changes because candidates are attractive to them or candidates are repulsive to them. But every time Donald Trump talks, I think he's just a condemnation of that theory. He just shows, no, it doesn't matter. You can be a total, well, as his former Secretary of State said, a total moron, his words and mine, and still have people be like, that's my guy because I like what he did. Well, the stuff he accomplished, I really love it. As if what you do and say as the president of the United States are not linked together. It is just the man. And, previous to that, he'd just gone on and on about how smart he thought Putin was by declaring parts of Ukraine independent and then moving a, quote, peacekeeping force in, and then said, we should do that on our southern border. Mm-hmm. We should invade Mexico with our military. He thought that was a good idea. I mean, it is just... The man, I just heard something. I saw people posting things about the windmills incident, and I hadn't seen that. That is unreal. I even thought there's no way he actually pivoted from what's going on in Ukraine to windmills and kills the birds, and I've stopped the windmill.
Oh, so funny. So very funny.
And people now are talking all the more like he's going to run for. Honestly, I hope he runs again. I would love it because, as the great line from the great movie, The Princess Bride, it's going to be humiliations galore. Like when you don't have the power of the presidency behind you any longer, you've been laid open before the American population for the person you are from your previous term in office, to the insurrection, to the stop the steal nonsense, and to just everything he continues to say now, just unfettered. I hope the man runs for office again and just feels the humiliations galore because he can't get over it. And I don't want to see people be humiliated. I think, I don't want to cheer on a person's demise, but sometimes, the best thing you can do is, to get what you asked for, and running again, I think would be great for that guy. Hey, are you done on that, or do you want to make any?
Yeah, oh, no, that's good. I just wanted to get your reaction.
I heard a NPR radio deal the other day, and it was hosted this segment by Sarah McCammon, who is a friend of ours and was on our Vocom Good Bus doing reporting. And has covered a lot of our work. And she's now rising in the stature at NPR. So I always listen more intently when Sarah McCammon is on. And she introduced this segment that we're going to play a piece of, which includes two congresswomen, both of whom we support. Both are Democrats, one of whom we've campaigned for and with twice, Susan Wild, and the other one is Representative Jayapal. And what came out of this little radio segment, voices of both of them, I thought was so helpful to understand one of the other dynamics in our politics. You have progressivism versus conservatism. You have republicanism versus democratism. You have structure versus unstructure. You have status quo versus new thought. Like, all of these are true forces in our politics. And there's one other one that this interview sort of brought into relief to me. And I thought, boy, this is where I think we are right now. And this is a debate inside, this one they're going to talk about is a debate inside of the Democratic caucus, but it also exists inside the Republican caucus. And it's this debate. Is our politics about getting things done, or is our politics and the reason for elections and the motivation for elections that it grabs the aspirations of people that were fighting for something that matters, regardless of getting it done? Do we hold to our principles? Do we advocate for the fight for the things that we want? And that's what voters demand. Or do we work to compromise and accomplish and not overpromise and get things done? Now, that is just all over the place, right? And people can land in these two camps, irrespective of their other, political differences. I would say on the Democratic side, I'm quite happy with that debate because they both seem legitimate, and I think they both move different kinds of voters. The ones who are like, I just like the person because she gets things done, or I like the person because she advocates for the things that matter, and she's in this for the long haul, right? No, she's not going to win every battle. That's not what it's about. It's about advocating. I like both of those. On the Republican side, currently, that same thing exists. They're like, hey, let's compromise. Let's get things done. Let's come up with good bills. Let's just move things forward. That's what legislation is about, the get stuff done crowd. And then the other more ideological crowd, unfortunately, the things they're advocating for, I really don't want to have people advocating for those things. And, telling trans kids that they're being endangered by their parents, separating kids from their parents at the border, telling women that they don't have healthcare choices, making sure that limitations are put on how our government interacts with individuals, and then just the blatant racism and pro-Russia nonsense that comes out of that group. So you have ideologues on both sides, and you have these people who are trying to accomplish something. So, Rob, I'm interested in your response to this because I don't think you've heard this in full. But here it is. This is Democratic Representative Susan Wild, and then Democratic Representative Jayapal, who are in this NPR radio interview or radio story that I think really capture this. So here we go.
Another Democrat in a purple seat, Congresswoman Susan Wild, skipped the conference with the president in her home state. She said it was more important to be in her district so her constituents know she's working to address the issues they care about.
One of those things will be the rising cost of gasoline and other products. I need to talk about what we are doing to make sure that the shortages that we are seeing in the grocery stores and that kind of thing are being addressed.
She said she can point to the bipartisan infrastructure bill and the progress coming out of COVID, but says her own party made a mistake pledging a sweeping social spending bill, which stalled out.
It's always a problem when overpromises are made, and I do think that there was a problem with some things being overpromised.
Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal of Washington State, who chairs the Progressive Caucus, pushed back at that.
I don't understand the overpromising thing. Elections are won on people believing your vision.
It's a reminder that the tension between the party's centrists and progressives, who couldn't agree on the price tag for Biden's signature legislative package, is still very real.
I think it isn't that we have to be able to get every single piece of our vision done, but we do need to show that we understand the pain that people are facing, and we have to be able to show that we're working on it and we're trying to get it done.
See, there it is, right? It's so clear, these two very articulate and well argued points. Yeah. Susan Wild basically saying what I mean by progressive is that we show progress in getting things done. Representative Jayapal saying what I mean by progressive is that we, as she puts it, speak in such a way that people believe in our vision and know that we're fighting hard for these causes, even if we don't get things done.
Even if we don't get everything done.
We don't get everything done. Yes.
Yeah.
So this is the dilemma, right? Like, is the role of our politics to cut a deal and move forward. And then some people really come down on all that, right? They just hate that stuff. They're like, now you're a rhino or a dino or whatever like all you're there to do is just strike a deal with the enemy. Some people, and then other people are like, look, I'm going to champion the thing that matters, and I'm not going to spend my time, worrying about these little bit, like in the State of the Union, Biden made some statement like, I have signed more bipartisan legislation than any president up until this date, or something like that. Some massive number of bills that he signed. And I was like, seriously? I don't hear about any of those. And I follow this stuff really closely. I don't hear about any of the like bipartisan accomplishment stuff that's been sort of moved along. I'm interested in your thoughts on that. Do you think that's just there's multiple constituencies and some people are motivated by one or the other? Do you think politics should be more about one than the other? Do you think it's just there's a time, it's the book of Ecclesiastes kind of response? How do you see it?
Yeah. I think depending on your reaction to the word compromise will probably determine where you fall on this spectrum. If you think the word compromise is a dirty word and you're like, oh, I don't like that person's a compromiser, and that's a negative thing, that indicates where you're at. Or if you say, what we need is compromise, and like that's what, like, we don't have enough compromise, and like if you have a positive reaction to the word. So I think the way that word gets used, that's probably like the bellwether in terms of where you stand on this. I think the reality is that they're both right. They're both right, and I agree with both of them. There is that sense of voters vary. I don't think you can say, well, voters demand that we compromise, that we get stuff done, or voters demand that we stick to our principles and we fight for the big ideas, because some voters demand this and some voters demand that. And that even varies on issues too. There's some that you want big structural change in some areas and you want incremental change in other areas. Now, I feel like I don't necessarily feel like I might be a good representation of this, because I have big, bold, progressive ideas that I believe in, but I'm also really pragmatic when it comes to politics. And I think one of the real dangers on the progressive side of things is a progressive political fundamentalism that I actually think that that's a real danger. But I think candidates who run with big, bold ideas, are the type of candidates that inspire people. I think the kind of, just be a moderate and, that's, I don't think that's the kind of candidate that inspires people. I think those that run with big, bold ideas do. But the job is one of conversation. But I think the danger that I think that the thing that a lot of progressives feel like is incremental change isn't good enough. It's, you have to fight so hard for every inch of ground that you get. Like, if we're going to fight this hard to get this inch, why, there's not that much of a difference in how hard we have to fight to get a foot. Why are we settling for an inch? You think about the fight that we had to get Obamacare, the health care marketplace. And that was, absolutely pulling teeth to get that accomplished. Well, that was it
was horrible. It's a horrible thing and it doesn't work. And most of us are absolutely frustrated, other than, the fact that we're
it's really one of those things was the compromise worth it? Was the compromise worth it?
Yeah. Well, look, yeah, I mean, I think that's, I think this is really the question that faces, more often than not, even more often than, you know, where someone is on their, uh, political location, party wise, or, progressive or not. What I actually think is the great, I mean, I think the great combination is someone who has a very bold idea and is willing to compromise. What I don't like is that the people who normally want to compromise often feel and sound like people who are like, I don't really have very big ideas. What I want is just a little. I like the kind of people that like want a big bold thing and say, okay, until we get that, we're going to take this, but we're going to keep moving with that. The phrase I thought was so helpful or so enlightening in this was when Representative Jayapal said, I don't really understand this overpromising complaint. And I'm sure Representative Wild is saying, like, you should understand that because people are really frustrated, right? And it's easy for people on both sides to look at the other one and say, hey, it's easy to be the compromiser. It's hard to hold to your values. And then the people who work on, making a deal and compromising say, it's easy to just sit over there and demand what you want and never have to put it into reality. Like, I don't understand you. Why are you taking the easy way out? This is the divide that I think Democratic Party could do very well to incorporate both of those and to talk about both of them and to show
and to value both of them.
To value them and say, this is what we're working out. Like, this is the thing we're doing, and start to articulate rather than make it feel like the separation that's going on inside the Democratic Party is true between the moderates and the progressives. And, this thing that's like, no, this is just the reality of what we live with. There's this great old religious teaching: without a vision, the people will perish, and without some food on the table, people will perish. So you kind of got to have both. You really do want to have this big, bold vision and get some things done along the way. But the idea that I don't understand the overpromising, or I don't understand people who want to just make promises and promises and promises about things that are never going to happen. What's that about? And they're both trying to say, I have to go home to my constituents and say, I did what you sent me there for, which is what? To get stuff done or to fight for our values? Well, no one I've ever met has said, I'll take just one of the two. Everybody says, can I get that in a combo meal with a drink? Can I include all three of those in there? And I feel like that is right, especially for the party that's in power at the federal level. This is the question. Can they motivate the base of, we need to get things done, and the base that says, I have strong values? And those two groups need to know and be in conversation with each other much, much, much more often, it seems to me. Anyway, that's my little political insight.
Yeah. I really like it. Yeah, I think it's spot on.
All right. Hey, if you're living in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, come see us on Saturday. If you're living in Columbus, Ohio, come see us on Sunday. If you're in West Michigan, see us in Grand Haven on Monday, in Grand Rapids on Tuesday, in Holland on Wednesday. If you're in South Bend, Indiana, come see us on Thursday. If you're in Madison, Wisconsin, come see us on Saturday. And if you're in Minneapolis, Minnesota, come see us a week from Sunday. We would love to see you. We're going to be traveling on the Common Good Immigration Tour, talking about what we saw and the people we met along the border, bringing some of them with us and showing portions of our documentary. And all of that, wherever you're watching this, all of that is going to come to you in those same places. We'll send some audio out for the podcast. And if you're watching live, we're going to be sharing this. Well, where in Columbus? Well, two places in Columbus, Barbara, I will tell you. In the morning, we're visiting a church, the Columbus Mennonite Church at 9:30 in the morning. And then that evening, we're at Jacob's Porch, which is over by the
Jacob's Porch, Jacob's Well.
Jacob's Porch.
Jacob's Porch.
Yeah, whole other church. Yeah. Backstory there.
Not Jacob's Well?
It's not. No. It's called Jacob's Porch. And we're there at 5:30. It's on the Ohio State University campus. all of this is the votecommongood.com website, all those, and there's also Facebook events. So Barbara, share this with your friends, share it around. Peggy, we know we're going to be seeing you. They're going to be spectacular events. Can't wait. Can't wait to see you. Producer Dan's going to be there. I'm going to be there. Ryerson, but not Rob. Vanessa Ryerson will be there. So people that you already know and love. So come be with your friends. And so that's going to interfere with some of our regular podcast schedule, by the way, because we're going to be coming to you in the evenings. So hang tight and look at us with a PM instead of an AM on your appointment watching.
Yeah, and I'd say this too, that tomorrow evening, for those of you that are on Twitter, I am going to be on a Twitter Spaces conversation, which is like the Twitter version of Clubhouse. I don't know if you use Twitter Spaces yet, Doug. I haven't, but I'm going to get my first chance tomorrow. So those of you that are on Twitter, come check it out. I'm going to be on with the Lincoln Project, talking about Vote Common Good, as well as a Lincoln Project called The Union, that you ought to check out, that Vote Common Good is proud to be a part of. And so if you're on Twitter tomorrow evening and follow me or follow the Lincoln Project, we're going to be having a conversation about Vote Common Good and stuff that the Lincoln Project has going on.
Lots of stuff happening in the common goodery of Vote Common Good. So we'll talk to you later, Gator. See ya.